everybody. Welcome to the 2023 fall season of the Tuesday evening lecture series. This is a hybrid presentation, which we haven't done in a while, so apologies for the issues. This presentation is being recorded, and once processed, will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for anyone to access at a later date. Can I have silence in the room, please?
Excuse me. He's doing announcing now for the.
If you have any questions for the speaker, please let me know online. Please type in your question in the chat function, and I'll do my best to relay. The questions to the speaker at an appropriate time. Or you can wait till the presentation is over and the question and answer session begins. So tonight's lecture is Cuba, culture, people, and birds. And it's being presented by the president of the Baltimore Bird Club, Joe Corcoran, who needs no introduction. Well, I was going to say some nice things about Joe, but then I realized he would do it himself. So, Joe Corcoran, you have this.
Okay. Now, can you hear me? Excellent. Okay. All right. So, couple things though before we get started with the Cuba presentation. I have a few announcements. First, before the Cuba presentation, Alex Pellegrini, one of our expert young birders, is going to do a presentation on barn owl monitoring. Okay, it's just a 10-minute presentation. He asked if he could have some time because he needs some help with barn owl monitoring, and he's going to go over that. Second, at Cromwell Valley, there's a migration watch, and we need some help for that to man a table, and that is on the 17th of September. So if anyone can volunteer for that, that would be good. Later on in October 21st, there's a brand new habitat called Serenity Ridge, which is a natural burial cemetery. But the grounds are gorgeous, and Frank Merengue has arranged that we can go birding there, and the Bird Club is going to be leading some trips there. But they're having a big fall event in October, and on October 21st, we're going to have a table there. We'll need some people from the club to man the table. So anyone's willing to do that, please let me know. And the final announcement is we are now on Instagram. The Baltimore Bird Club has an Instagram. Libby Erickson set it all up, and she's monitoring it. There's been a bunch of announcements, including announcements about this presentation. So if you're on Instagram, look for us, the Baltimore Bird Club. Okay? All right. So now we're going to switch over to Alex Pellegrini for 10 minutes, and then I'll get into my presentation.
Thank you. So thanks, Joe, first of all, for giving me 10 minutes today. My name's Alex, and I'm here to talk about barn owls, and specifically barn owls of Maryland. I'm with the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership's Farmland Raptor program. And first, I just wanted to start with some basics, some owl basics. So there's two families of owls, if you didn't know, and there's Strigidae and Titonidae. So the Strigidae owls are probably very familiar to you. You've probably maybe even seen all of them, the examples that I picked here, and that's because they all occur in the state of Maryland. But we're not here to talk about them. We're here to talk about Titonidae owls. And Titonidae owls may look much more unfamiliar to you, as only the barn owl occurs in the state. And actually, for that matter, occurs in all of North America. It's the only Titonidae species. And what you might notice about these owls is that they have quite the different look to them. Some may even call this look an unsettling look. And if you're the owl lover like me, you might disagree, but maybe you can agree that this is the face that only a mother can love. And maybe a mother or bird people like us. But if you listen to their vocalizations, which sound a little something like this, maybe you can understand how these owls have inspired myths and scary stories and things alike. And especially if you're living in the early 1700s or say before that, you're tending to your cattle in the barn, and you hear this one night, and you look up, and this is what you see looking down in your candlelight above you. You can imagine that you might be terrified. Well, they don't just deal this nightmare fuel to us North Americans. Barn owls are distributed worldwide, so they are cosmopolitan. They're on every continent except for Antarctica. And although they're considered a single species in all these areas highlighted purple, they are not. But that's a topic for another time. So I've talked about, the frightening looks that these owls may have to them, the scary stories they inspire, but really these are one of the most beautiful creatures on the planet. And there is culture and stories that is more reflective of this and better recognizes the incredible birds they are. Birds definitely deserving of conservation, although all birds are. And you can see here, this barn owl is hunting over a grassland habitat. And that's really what I want you to focus on here. This grassland habitat is the perfect habitat for these barn owls. In addition to meadows and pasture lands, also they'll make a living in marshes and orchards, but where they will not be able to make a living is in row crop areas. So areas, where they're growing corn and beans, these row crop areas do not support their food because they're spraying rodenticides and pesticides, and it's killing and keeping away these cute little guys, meadow voles, which are just the most tasty thing in the world for a barn owl, and really any predator will not pass up the chance to eat a meadow vole, so they must be pretty tasty. But why meadow voles? So meadow voles live in these grassy habitats, and they are not subterranean, so they're foraging in areas that look like this, in these little corridors and things. And apparently they're very, very noisy, so they're squeaking back and forth to each other constantly, and this makes them the perfect prey for barn owls, which hunt with their ears. So these meadow voles typically make up around 90% of the barn owl's diet. As I said, that these meadow voles are the favorite food of a barn owl. Yet some of our Western Shore populations, which have been well studied, we only find that only about 40% of the diet is made up of meadow voles. Another 40% of their diet is made up of rice rats, so marsh rice rats. Another 19% of red-winged blackbirds and Sora rails, Virginia rails, even least bitterns and things have been found in these nest boxes. And then a spattering of other things like shrews and really whatever else they can find. So what's important about this is that it's showing that this food analysis shows that these barn owls are having to make a living in suboptimal habitat. And citizen science tools and things that we put together, like the Breeding Bird Atlas, do a great job of giving us a look at the status of barn owls in the state. So between the first and the second Breeding Bird Atlas, a 72% statewide decline was observed. Now, Scott Smith with DNR in the 1986, 1987, or for the first Breeding Bird Atlas, made a huge effort to find these barn owl nest sites. And this effort was not duplicated for the second Breeding Bird Atlas. So it's tough to say if this statewide decline estimate is entirely accurate. But when we looked at Scott Smith's old records, we did not find barn owls in the same places he did. And it should be no surprise, as it has been 40 years almost since the first Breeding Bird Atlas, that when we looked, we not only did not find barn owls there, but we also found completely different habitat. And you can really see in these two maps I have here, it shows the land use changes. So although these are a few years off the dates of the BBAs, the first Breeding Bird Atlas, was done in the 86, but this is 1973 map. Well, it's obvious that the land use has changed significantly, and we're not going to dive too deeply into this, but just trust me when I tell you that this change was not for the benefit and did not benefit barn owls and many birds alike. So I'm going to show you one more map. This map illustrates the change from the first Breeding Bird Atlas to the second Breeding Bird Atlas. And while we're not certain about many of these numbers listed down below, what we are certain about is this 57% decline on the Western Shore, so in this purple area here. And as I mentioned, this Western Shore population is well studied. That's where we got the food analysis from that I spoke of earlier. But interestingly enough, we still don't know a lot about barn owls on the western side of the bay. So a really interesting population is the Garrett population. You can see that there's some loss showed there, but Garrett barn owls do still exist. They do still nest in Garrett County. And what's interesting about that is barn owls' hunting strategy doesn't allow them to pack on a lot of fat. So they can't survive the cold, harsh winters in Garrett County. Well, how are they nesting there still then? Well, we think that they leave, but tracking technologies and assortments of other things really just aren't at the point where we can know the movements of barn owls during these winter months. We just can't study it very well. But what we currently do know, and we can take a look at, is I can tell you that the Eastern Shore population of barn owls is stable. So the thought, which is fascinating to me, is that barn owls have always existed on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. They've always been there, pre-human times. And then when humans came in and they started clearing the forest and making all this open landscape, open habitat, the barn owls moved in and they began hunting the rodents because that's the habitat that they thrive in. So now the question is, should we conserve barn owls, on the western side of the bay if they weren't originally there? Well, yes, we should. The trees are gone. The forest has been cleared in these areas. So as long as we have this open habitat, we should work to conserve the species that can benefit from it. Now let's talk a little bit about the conservation efforts. And I'm not going to go through this whole list, but just from glancing over the dates, what I want you to notice is that it's spotty when people are caring about barn owls and making efforts towards their conservation. So in 1991, Maryland put them on the watch list, and that's exactly what they did. They just watched them decline. And then in 2015, the Maryland State Wildlife Action Plan was developed in conjunction with DNR, and this led to the creation of the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership and subsequently the Maryland Farmland Raptor Program. So the Maryland Farmland Raptor Program, what do they do? Well, what we're doing is we're trying to gain a better understanding of the ecology of barn owls in Maryland. We're looking at reproduction, mortality, habitat use, range, natal dispersal, and seasonal movements like the ones that I mentioned in Garrett County. We want to do these 5 goals right here. So obtain a baseline for statewide abundance, identify critical habitats, ensure adequate and consistent monitoring. And number 4, which is really important, broaden citizen participation, as well as become the principal gateway. But number 4 is why I'm here to talk to you today. As Joe said, I'm looking for some help. So I'm looking for you all to get involved, or hopefully at least some of you. So when we looked at barn owls in Baltimore County this year, I couldn't find any. I spent countless hours along with a whole team of people, of volunteers, and we could not find any barn owls. So if you have information, if you have anything that could benefit our effort, I would love to get you involved and talk to you. But what I'm also looking to do next year is put together a survey for the nesting season, and I can talk to you more about that if you're interested in helping out with that survey. Maybe for some of you listers, it can get you your lifer barn owl or your county barn owl for that matter. But it's also a chance to really help a species that needs it. And I want to introduce this Roger Tory Peterson quote to you if you've never seen it, because it really speaks to me. And it is that birding, after all, is just a game. Going beyond that is what is important. So, other than doing surveys and things like that, other ways to go beyond that and get involved are helping build nest boxes, finding and contacting landowners, or we can get creative with it if you're interested. And you can contact me at my email right there. You can find more information on the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership website. You can go to the Farmland Raptor section of that website. Find me on Facebook or wherever you can in the field. Maybe we'll see each other, and I would love to speak with you guys about this issue. And I, hope to hear from some of you soon. So thank you so much for listening to me and giving me 10 minutes of your time today. I really, truly appreciate it.
Hey, can you hear me, Neville? Okay, everybody Linda, can you hear me? Do you have your hearing aids in? Oh, okay. Because if she can hear me without the hearing aids in, we're good. All right, so I'm going to talk today about a trip that me, Linda Corcoran, Nancy O'Hara, and Kathy Lambrow took in March for 2 weeks, from like the 1st to the 14th. We got a trip to Cuba, and we're going to talk not only about the birds, but about the culture and the people, and then and something about the conservation and other things that we saw there. Cuba is a wonderful country. It's quite unique. It sits just south of Florida. Here's Havana right here, and fly from here to, it's only like 100 miles from the closest point from Florida to Cuba. And so our flight from Orlando only took 45 minutes. Our flight from Baltimore to Florida actually took a lot longer. Okay, but you can see there's Cuba, there's the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and Puerto Rico. All three of these were Spanish at one time, including Florida, right? They were all Spanish colonies. So we took the trip with a company called Cuba 360. We flew into Havana, and then we went west to some gorgeous mountains, and then back east to a couple places. Then we went all through the Bay of Pigs, which is famous for the 1961 invasion, and went through all these different places, Trinidad, all the way down here to Najasa. Now, what you're not seeing, I'm getting some feedback here. Yeah. What you're not seeing is the rest of the island, which I'll show you here. Okay. So here are the cam getting cam. Okay, good now. Okay, so what you were seeing before was the trip only goes out to this far. These are actually the eBird hotspot locations that we went to bird. And what over here, this is Guantanamo Bay. That's where the United States still has a military naval base here. Okay, so and that area is actually kind of more remote. It's the last place that the ivory-billed woodpecker was seen. Okay, and so we did not go into this area, but it is kind of real, and there would like to get there. I'd love to get there to see the birds in there. Okay, so again, Cuba's unique. It's a big melting pot. It's about 60% white population, primarily Spanish, from Spanish heritage, from Spain, about 10% black, and the remainder mixed, including some native population, Taigo, native Indians that were there at one time. Right now, it has a communist socialist government, which it was first Fidel Castro, then his son. Now there's a new guy. And with Fidel and his compatriot Che Guevara had their Cuban Revolution in 1961. Before that, in 1891 was the Spanish-American War, or 1898, excuse me. That's when the Spanish were ejected from the island, basically, not only there, but from Haiti and also from Puerto Rico. As a result of the Spanish-American War, the United States got Puerto Rico. Haiti was independent. They had actually already been independent. Haiti was a big slave revolt. It was one of the biggest slave revolts, and actually a successful slave revolt, one which the Southern slave owners were deathly afraid of happening in the United States at the time. So anyway, they had a successful slave revolt, and so Haiti was not part of the Spanish kingdom at the time of the Spanish-American War. So the United States helped to get rid of the Spanish in the 1898 Spanish-American War, but they kind of started to gradually take over the island, owning land and stuff like that, to the point people were there was a lot of poverty in the island, other issues that they were having, and so eventually there was a revolution to drive out basically the Americans. And there was back and forth, back and forth. The Americans were supporting Fidel and they were supporting Batista first, but then they started supporting Fidel. But there were some disagreements. He took over, he nationalized a lot of things. And there were some disagreements with the U.S. And then he kind of fell in with the Soviet Union, and it became a communist revolution. Now, one of the things that was a problem with the Cubans, the native Cuban, was the mafia control of Havana. The mafia was big. They had a big input with Batista. Meyer Lansky was a big mob boss that went down and cultivated, and they were turning Havana into the Las Vegas of the Caribbean. So we're talking about prostitution, gambling, drugs, stuff like that. And that was one of the things that the Cubans were against and wanted to get rid of that. So the Americans were basically kicked out, and the Americans did try to get back in with the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, but it failed. It was organized by the CIA. Some people say the mafia was involved, and some expatriates from Cuba who had fled the island during the revolution. And then it failed. So, but as a result of that was the American embargo, and the embargo has been in place since then. So countries cannot, the United States does not deal economically with Cuba, and it actually punishes other countries that do. So it's causing a little bit of economic hardship. But even though it's a communist socialist country, 70% of the population is Christian. About 60% Catholic, about 10% Protestant, stuff like that. The Pope was there in 2004, basically asking for us to stop the embargo, but it's been going on since forever. So in order to travel there, it's not easy. It's not like a normal country. You have to get a special visa, and there are different categories. I think there's like 10 to 12 different categories you have to get to choose as to what's your reason for going to Cuba. Is it research? Is it for study? Is it for you have relatives there? Or the one that we used to be able to get there was support of the Cuban people. And what that meant was we were not allowed to have anything to do with the government. Any government-owned business, any government facility, any government schools, stuff like that. We were only allowed to work to be with private citizens who had their own businesses. So we had to show that we dealt with those businesses, and we had to have receipts, and we have to keep the receipts for 5 years of all the private businesses that we dealt with. So they have a small private, I guess, capitalist sector, which is growing, and which is, I guess, is a good thing. And tourism is growing. It's an absolutely gorgeous island. There are no McDonald's. No, you don't see a McDonald's signs, Kentucky Fried Chicken signs. You don't see all the commercialism that you see in the United States. There's only one McDonald's in the whole island. Does anyone know where it might be? Yes. All right. Yes, that's absolutely true. It's in the base in Guantanamo. So, let's see what we have here. So, now under the Obama administration, it was opened up for travel to go to Cuba, and a lot of people went. Then it was closed down under the Trump administration, and now it's been opened up again by the Biden administration, but only partially. So it's not it's a lot to do to be able to get there. So again, we took a direct flight from Florida. Once we were in Florida, it was an easy flight over. There was, their flights Southwest, other airlines fly directly into Havana. Now, the thing they have with the communist government and how things are managed, plus the embargo, there's economic scarcity. There's scarcity of food, fuel, drugs, prescription drugs are pretty low. Electricity, there were rolling blackouts the whole time we were there. So this weather that you feel inside this building right now is typical for living in Cuba. It's hot, and then there's, without air conditioning. There were air conditioners, little mini air conditioners in some of the buildings that we went to, or some of the places that we went, but they weren't always working. Spotting telephone and self-service was not always good. And but one good thing is they like American currency, because American currency they can use anywhere else. So when you pay for stuff on the streets and stuff like that, they like it if you can give it an American currency, because it's more valuable. It's a big black market, basically, is what they have there if you want to buy stuff there. Okay. Now, this picture here of the cars in the background, this is Havana, and this is what the tourists typically see, and have the old cars. Cubans are famous for having old cars and keeping them up. Why? Because they couldn't get parts. But if these old cars here are more for tourists, the rest of the country is not just American cars. There's a lot of Russian cars, there's European cars, there's new cars from Europe, there's Volkswagen, all kinds of different cars that you can see there. But because of getting parts, and especially for the American cars, there's a lot of rebuilding, and there's a lot of rebuilding where you might get a Ford car and you have a Toyota engine in it. Okay. Okay, so one of the things that we found out right away, this is the first place that we were staying, is that there's a paper shortage. So toilet paper and napkins are at a premium. So at our first dinner, we were eating, and I'm asked for napkins, and no, we have none. And then we were thinking, well, we'll get some bathroom tissue. No, none of the bathroom. Now, we brought some, so we had something. So anyway, this is me at dinner forming a napkin out of a tea bag. So I tore open a tea bag and pour out the contents and use it as a napkin. I actually used it as a napkin, and it's not. I'm used to using a napkin. So when I didn't use a napkin, when I didn't have a napkin, I was like, where do I wipe my hands? I don't want to wipe on their table or anything. So I did it on a tea bag. I mentioned about the shortages of the prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs. These are people in Cuba waiting for line at a pharmacy. And if you actually look inside the pharmacy, there's a number of shelves that we saw on the one pharmacy we saw. The shelves are bare. There's like one thing here and there's one thing there. So one of the things they asked us to do when we came down there was to bring over-the-counter drugs for the people that we met there, including the people whose casas, whose houses we were staying at, who had the private businesses like bed and breakfast, basically. And so we brought down ibuprofen, aspirin, stuff like that. They appreciate it because certain people had like migraines and they can't get headache medicine, and we brought some down to them. The other thing we brought with us were school supplies. So we brought a lot of crayons, pencils, paper, coloring books, all kind of school supplies for the students down there. So the meals were good, but it was home cooked. It was typically fish and potato and rice and some vegetables. Locally caught fish. It was very tasty. This is a terrace of a casa particular. Casa particular is where we were allowed to stay because it was a small private business, and some of them were kind of nice. So as far as Cuba, sports are very popular. The communist government promoted that in Cuba, that it's a big deal for people to be in shape and stuff like that. So baseball by far is the biggest sport there. There's Cuban baseball players playing in American League teams and National League teams right now. I can't give you any names, but there's at least 3 or 4. Some of them have left the country and defected. Some of them are not, have not. Okay. And also the other sports are boxing was big. I don't know if any Dick or anybody remembers Sugar Ray Leonard those days and Roberto Duran. The Olympic boxers, the ones who won were always the Cubans. It's still popular, and also popular is basketball. Here's the Bay of Pigs that we talked about. This is actually a cove off the Bay of Pigs. The Bay of Pigs is out here. Again, that's where the attempt to overthrow that government failed back in 1961. And some people think because of that and the mafia involvement, which is suspected, not proven, is part of the reason that Kennedy was shot. Because it was they think it was could have been a mafia guy that actually shot Jack Ruby, this mafia that got Lee Harvey Oswald to shoot Kennedy, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's just a wild theory, but I don't know. So modes of transportation. This is out in the countryside. So in the cities, there's lots of cars. There's lots of different cars, all over. But once you get out to the countryside, it's dirt roads and horses. And carts, horse carts. There's still cars, but they're few and far between. Here's horses and a horse cart. This is one of the cars that's been kept up. It's an old 1955 Dodge, I think. But again, you'll get in these cars and you'll be riding down the road and you'll see that the speedometer and the gas meter and nothing works because it's not hooked up, because the engine that's in there is a Toyota engine or some other engine. And so they'll have like a cell phone with an app that tells them which speed they're going at so they don't go past the posted speed limits. So it's really kind of funny. And then door handles don't work. I remember at one point we wanted to get in the guy's car at the end in Havana. He said, no, you can't get in that way. You have to jump over because the car, once it opened, you couldn't get it closed. Reminds me of India, actually, when I was in India, because I did a lot of traveling for work. And birding, that's exactly why I did so much traveling for work. And I'll admit it to my bosses now, I did not do it then. So I volunteered to go all over the world, to Africa, to Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and they all thought I was doing, man, Joe does the hard work. Joe does the hard jobs. And they had no idea that I was going so I could go to the birding places. And so I saw a lot of different birds. The first big trip was to South Africa, where no one wanted to go. Well, no, I'm not going to Africa. It's too hard of a trip. But we had to send someone because that was part of the contract. And so I volunteered. They said, no, Joe, you can't go. That's not your product. I said, I'll learn the product. They let me do it, and it was one of the best trips of my life. I ended up going on safari for a week because I was stuck there because the local people broke into the customs office and stole the computers. So I couldn't get the purchase parts I needed, but I'm going off things. I was talking about India, a similar thing. In India, they have old taxis that were made from an old Indian car company, and the car company's out of business, so they keep their taxis up. They just keep reworking them. And when you get a taxi in India, you get the driver too, and he'll sit outside your meeting and wait and stuff like that. And they drive on the left side of the road. So the one time after a meeting, I came out and tried to open the door, but I was on the wrong side from where I was supposed to, and I pulled, and the handle came off of my hand, and the poor Indian owner was like, ay, 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 ay. He was really mad. And I said, I'm sorry, here's your handle. And anyway, so I gave him extra money so he could get his handle. Okay. Anyway, so anyway, they keep these kind of cars up. Here's a regular Jeep. Alongside a horse cart. Again, some more horse carts out in the countryside. This was a fabulous birding place back in here where we went. This is the Western Mountains. They actually have mountains there in Cuba, which I didn't know, that are up over 3,000 feet, similar to Western Maryland and West Virginia. Beautiful, beautiful countryside out there. Some really good birds, too. Okay, so now a little bit about Cuba. If you have any questions, you can ask them, and I'll try to answer the best I can. But now I want to talk more about the birds and the conservation effort. So again, this was our tour. It's Cuba 360. They actually have an office in the United States, I think, but it's run out of Cuba, and they're allowed to do it. They've got permits to be able to do this. And so again, we started in Havana. We went west to this beautiful mountain area. Then we went east through the Zapata Swamp. There were some really rare birds there, some that haven't been seen since 2010 or 2004. And then we went all the way down to Najasa, excuse me, but we did not go over to near Guantanamo Bay. Cayo Coco, you'll see, was a gorgeous, gorgeous beach area. And the beaches are all great. There's no commercialization. There's no McDonald's. There's no Walmarts or whatever. You just don't see any of that stuff there. Even the restaurants in town don't really advertise. It's just like a small sign that you'll see. You sort of have to know where the places are. Okay, so there are 29 endemic species, of which 2 are likely extinct, and that's what makes Cuba such a popular birding spot. They're endemic because it's an island, and typically islands do have endemics that occur nowhere else. About 20% of the country's area is protected, which is good. There are 28 important bird areas as identified by BirdLife International. On our trip, we saw 160 species out of a total of about 400. So we saw about 40% of the species of Cuba, and out of the 29 endemics, and out of 27 endemics that we could see, we saw all of them. We saw all the 27, so we did pretty good. The guides were really good. This is our guide, Jose, who works for Cuba 360. Jose Cesar Suarez. He's an ornithologist, 25 years experience, leading tours around Cuba. He's an expert. He's been written up in different magazines and travel guides, including The Lonely Planet. This is him with a Baltimore Club t-shirt, which I'm wearing right now, but that's what it looks like on the back. And he has a Baltimore Oriole hat. He loved that hat, and he loved that t-shirt. And because a lot of places you go overseas, the only hats that they have of ball teams are from, what do you see when you're overseas? What ball teams are on the hats? New York Yankees, who we hate. So he has a Baltimore Oriole cap to counter the New York Yankee hats in Cuba. Anyway, he really loved that. He wore that hat every day. Okay. This is the Cuban trogon, the national bird of Cuba. It's absolutely gorgeous. I don't know how a bird with so much white in it survives with the predators, but it does, and it's the national bird of Cuba. That we saw them pretty much everywhere around the island. It's a great lizard cuckoo, not an endemic, but a liked bird for most of us. The huge bird, of course, feeds on lizards, and there's plenty of lizards and amphibians in Cuba. This is one of the highlights of Cuba, the Bee Hummingbird, the smallest bird in the world. It's only about 2 inches, so about this big. In binoculars, it looks big, but when you actually see it, it looks like a big hornet or like a big bee. It is really, really tiny. And gorgeous bird with their gorget. And we had lots of fun trying to get good photographs of this bird. This is a male on the left and a female on the right. They actually have another bird, a Cuban emerald, not endemic, but you see it all around Cuba. It's a beautiful, all green, shimmering hummingbird. Here's a nice, cute little bird. It's called a toady, and this is a Cuban toady. My wife and I were in Puerto Rico about 40 years ago. We saw the Puerto Rican toady, which is endemic to that island, and this is the Cuban toady. It's a really cool bird. Small also, only about 3.5 inches long. Cuban green woodpecker, again, endemic, beautiful bird. A West Indian woodpecker. That's throughout the Caribbean, that's seen. Look at those 2 sharp spikes on the tail. That's their, which one? What are those feathers called? Rectrices, that they use to brace themselves against a tree when they're pecking or drumming. In case you weren't aware, woodpeckers peck for food, but they drum for mating call. So a lot of the fast-paced sounds of woodpeckers are mating calls for females. They'll find a place where it sounds the loudest. Some people in the suburbs complain that they're doing it on their aluminum siding, but the louder, the better for the woodpecker. And this is a gray catbird, believe it or not, which we saw down there. There were a few of them down there. A Cuban peewee. Okay, here we have different peewees. We have an eastern wood peewee, have a western wood peewee, we have a greater peewee. I think in South America and Central America, this is the Cuban peewee. And they look alike. They look like a peewee. We're fairly bland, but you have to identify them, or mostly identify them by their voices. Loggerhead kingbirds. You can see it has a classic, like our eastern kingbird, it has a white tail tips. It was a life bird for many of us. A Cuban vireo. This is it is endemic, excuse me. It is an endemic, and it looks like a vireo. It actually sounds like our vireos here, but it has this distinct white subocular ring, or what's that ring? Ocular ring? Whatever. Okay. Anyway, okay. A Cuban solitaire. Out west in the United States, we have the Townsend solitaire, which is a thrush. In Cuba, they have the Cuban solitaire. Gorgeous bird. We heard lots of them singing. They have a beautiful song. Red-legged thrush. These are common throughout the West Indies, on Puerto Rico and the other islands, and pretty common everywhere around in Cuba. And it's a beautiful bird. It's got nice big red eyes and nice red legs. This is a Western spindalis, which I think is in its own class right now. It used to be considered a tanager. I don't think it is anymore. It's in its own little category. That's a gorgeous bird that we saw. Here is a yellow-headed warbler. You can see, as the name implies, it has a yellow head. There we go. And a nice white eye ring. This was a hard bird to get. Warblers are notorious, and their foliage is thick down there, and it's hard to actually get a good a photo of one. But we were able to with enough patience. This is probably not my photo, because probably either Kathy or Nancy, they have more patience than I do. They probably got this one. In fact, mostly the good photos are theirs. I got a couple good ones. They got the really good ones. This is mine. This is one I got. Cuban grassquit. That's an endemic species. It's like a sparrow-like grassland bird. Really gorgeous bird. This is a yellow-faced grassquit. That's a common bird. I actually saw these in Costa Rica, and I think in South America, Ecuador, but I'm not certain. Oh, no, Panama. Sorry, Panama. And a Cuban blackbird. It's black, and you have to to tell it from other blackbirds by its voice. But it's endemic. It's only found in Cuba. Cuban oriole, which is really cool. They actually have some yellow on them. It's not this best picture right here, but they were pretty cool birds, and beautiful sound, beautiful song. And then one of our places that we went is to Zapata Swamp. It covers about 1.5 million acres. It's one of the most important wetlands in Cuba. It has some of the most rare birds in Cuba. This particular one is an olive cap warbler, but the swamp includes marshes, peat bogs, mangroves, coral reefs, and a forest. And it's home to the critically endangered Cuban crocodile. There's an American crocodile too, in case you didn't know it. Crocodiles tend to be more aggressive than alligators. Thank goodness our alligators aren't that aggressive. The crocodiles are. Okay, the Zapata sparrow, pretty rare. And we got lucky and got a photo of one. This is actually my photo, so I'm kind of happy about that. That's a gorgeous sparrow. The Zapata wren took us a long time to get this bird. They tried calling it in for a number of times. It didn't come in, and finally, out of nowhere, it just showed up. It's a huge wren. It's size of like a cactus wren, if you're familiar with that in the United States. It's a big, large wren. We saw limpkin there. And actually, you don't have to go all the way to Cuba to find limpkins now. You can see them in, say again? C&O Canal. They have a limpkin down there right now. Unbelievable. It's some people are thinking that these birds are coming up because of climate change. For sure, there's lots of roseate spoonbills. There have been a number of them have been coming up. Limpkins and hingas nest down in Patapsco Halethorpe Ponds, right across the pond. There's an hinga nest. So a lot of the tropical species are kind of moving north, so people are keeping an eye on that. That's why the eBird data and the other data that Alex does with the Maryland, what's the Maryland, what's it called? The Maryland. Oh, come on, somebody tell me the name. Yes, that's one. Thank you. Okay, so outside of Zapata, it's again, it's you can see the typical like farm of goats, and then a fence just made of sticks. Pretty rustic. It was pretty rustic there. Not many cars, not much of anything once you get down into this near swampy area. There's Fernandina flicker. Gorgeous bird. It looks kind of like a northern flicker, but it's called the Fernandina flicker. There's a northern flicker, but this is not the same as our bird. It's a subspecies of the northern flicker. It's a Cuban subspecies. Say again, please. That's a great question. Linda, do you remember? Was it yellow shafted or red shafted? Let's see. Uh-oh, what happened? Oh, let's go again. It won't go backwards. Anyway, I'm not sure. I'll check for you later. Send me a text. As you see yellow? Yeah, but it's still a different subspecies. It's not the same subspecies. And the warblers. And the thing about the warblers, in March, they've got their brand new spring plumage, and they are so bright and gorgeous, and we really got to see them. This is where we saw the Bee Hummingbird. There was a place there were a lot of warblers around. Black-throated green, black-throated blue. Cape May are actually one of my favorite warblers. Yellow-throated warblers, another favorite. Yellow warblers, they're really gorgeous. Here's a nice, beautiful prairie warbler. This all nice. And then a palm warbler here. Northern parula. Or how do you guys say it? Parula or parula? Parula. Some people say parula. Some people say parula. Anyway, out west. Tawny shoulder blackbird. Okay. It's got a little bit of it's actually a tawny beige type color, similar to our red-winged blackbirds. The eastern meadowlark, but it's a Cuban subspecies. So it has slightly different plumage, slightly different song. And could be split eventually, okay? So it could end up being its own species. They have their own boa, which was really wild. I didn't realize they had those down there. It's a Cuban boa. Okay, this is a blue-headed quail dove, and it's a gorgeous bird. I'm going to break from this for a second, and I'm going to show a little video. See if I can get this. The only problem with all the lights out is I can't see. Oh, here we go. All right, so it was this one. Oh, this one, I believe. Yes. It's going to load up, and then we're going to see a video. They're displaying. They're displaying for females. I'll show it again in case people didn't see it at home. They're really beautiful. Awesome. So while I'm off screen, oh, here we go. I wanted to show these other photos at the risk of making someone angry. I hope not. We'll see. Come on. This is my wonderful wife, Linda. And I called over to her and she gave me this look like, what the hell does he want? But then she noticed that I had the camera and all of a sudden this big smile came on her face. So, Lynn, I hope I'm not upsetting you or anything. Please don't hit me or anything till we get home. Okay. All right. All right, so let's go back to the presentation. Ah, I did that wrong, didn't I? Yeah, yeah. Where's this? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, now I want to go from, oh, go down this way. Okay, thank you. Sorry for the little delay. Where am I? Oh, here we go. And then oh yeah, okay, we're getting there, getting there, getting there, getting there, getting there. Yep, 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 yep. All right, so we start here. There we go. Now this is a gray-fronted dove. What happened? It didn't come to the beginning. I did again. All right. Let's go here. 51. 50. Okay. 50. Now what? And I hit the other one, didn't I? Okay. Sorry about that. Well, we're getting a lot of technical difficulties today. Sorry about all this. Gorgeous endemic gray-fronted quail dove. Gray-fronted because this is called the front. Whenever you hear a yellow-fronted or gray-fronted or red-fronted, that's where you look for wherever that color is. Zenaida dove. It's a quail dove. And a Key West quail dove. It's another type of quail dove. Cuban parakeet. And parakeets typically have long, pointed tails, where parrots are more slim, where parrots are more compact and have squared off tails. So there's your parrots here. Here's a Cuban parrot. Not endemic because it's found on a couple of the other islands, but it's called the Cuban parrot. Gorgeous birds. Can everybody see that? The little bare-legged owl? We saw this from a distance. From a distance, our guide saw this bird poking its head out, and there's no way. I went, where is it? But once you look closely, you can see the little owl coming out. It's a bare-legged owl. These are Salinas Flats. These are at Zapata Swamp. It's full of flats and peat bogs and all kinds of nice wetland areas, and pretty remote. This is our swamp mobile, it's called. This is like a regular car, but they cut off the back and welded on the box. And I think it was likely, and on inside the box are two side benches where you sit. So 4 of us can fit back there, and it's quite hot back there. And I'm thinking this was like a prison wagon or something like that. I'm not sure what was going on there, but this is a Cuban pickup truck, let's say. So that was kind of an interesting ride because you can't see anything while you're in there. They have to stop, so it was kind of hot and everything. But anyway, but and I left it out, and I meant to put it back in. But we did have a modern vehicle that took us around the island. It was like a 2020 SUV. It was really nice. We had to use this one in Zapata. A young American flamingo. They don't come up to the United States. There is one in St. Mark's Wildlife Refuge that comes back every year in the Panhandle of Florida. But other than that, we don't see American flamingos too much. Occasionally in the Everglades, but down in Cuba, the Caribbean, there's plenty. This is a clapper rail. I don't know if I mentioned, but there's the rail that we were looking for. What we were hoping to see was the Zapata rail, which hasn't been seen since 2010, and we did not see it. There's a Cuban blackhawk, which is relatively common, similar to our blackhawk in the Southwest. We have a blackhawk. Cuban nightjar, which we saw at night, which is a nice photo by Kathy Lambrell, I think, or maybe Nancy, but whoever's it was a good photo to get it at night because they had to wait till the lights were on it. It's a smaller nightjar. American kestrel, but look at the front of it. Look how white it is. It's a white subspecies. They had white here and gray here, two different color morphs of the same subspecies, not the same American kestrel here, different subspecies. Cuban pygmy owl. There's pygmy owls in our west. There's other pygmy owls in Costa Rica and other areas. This is the Cuban endemic pygmy owl, meaning small. They're like this size, maybe 4.5, 5 inches tall. Cuban gnatcatcher. You can see it has this black behind the eye, right? Ours has the black over the eye, the males do. And there's a black cap gnatcatcher in Arizona that comes up from Mexico, but this is the Cuban version of the gnatcatcher. And they sound similar to gnatcatchers with that high, thin seat sound. We've had to share the road with this cart. Okay. This looks like this wheel was welded from steel. A lot of times these wheels will be like an old car wheel. Okay, that they from an old car, the tire's no good, and they'll just put that on one of these wagons. Okay. And they have to carry around water, gasoline, whatever. Gasoline is scarce too. So a lot of times the vehicles carry extra gasoline, especially if they're going a long way, because they don't know if they're going to be able to get gas along the way. And then once they fill up and they're full of gas canisters, full of gas, guess what the car smells like? Yeah, it's gas. Ooh, this is a really cool bird, a giant kigbird. This thing was huge. Look at the beak on that thing. I mean, it looks like it catches bats or small birds or something with that. But that's a really, really cool bird. It was like that. But again, an endemic species. A palm crow. There's actually a crow, a different type of crow. It's a little bit smaller, but still behaves like a crow and hangs around palms, as you can see. Here's a plain pigeon. It's a big bird. It's actually quite big. The people at home can't see me moving my hands, but it's a nice sized bird. And when they fly, you can't miss them. But once they land, you can miss them easily because they blend in so well. It took us a while to locate this particular one, even though we saw where it flew and where it landed. Here's a red-shouldered blackbird. Okay, the red it's an endemic species, not the red wing. It looks like a red wing, but the shoulder patch is different color, different amounts of different red and a different yellow and a different shape. So there's a red and it's up higher on the wing. So this is a red-shouldered blackbird. Here's the Zapata rail I was talking about. It's not been seen since November 2014, and I think Kathy or whoever used an internet photo for this. Tricolored munias. Oops, we go back. Those are from Indonesia, that area of the world, Asia. And they've been introduced and they've populated. They were a neat bird to see. Okay, and another place, one of the places I was talking about are the beaches and the beautiful beaches on the north side, closest to Florida. Cayo and Cayo Coco, K's, C-A-Y, like little islands, basically, what they are. Really beautiful. We saw lots of the good water birds. I don't know if you know that there's a variation of the great blue heron called a Werdeman's heron. It's all white, and we saw a number of them there. It's not an egret. It's actually a great blue heron with a white more or white coloration. And there's a great blue heron in comparison. A tri-colored heron. We saw a number of those. White-cheeked pintail. This is like my favorite duck because of that bill. That bright orange phosphorescent orange-red bill is gorgeous. And we saw a number of them. A white-cheeked pintail. West Indian whistling ducks are new birds for us. Their cousins are, of course, the black-bellied whistling ducks and the white-faced whistling ducks. Fulvous whistling ducks. Fulvous whistling ducks are circumpolar also, by the way. It's always neat to, like, barn swallows are circumpolar. It's just really wild to see a barn swallow in China. And it's like, wow. And osprey are circumpolar, too. Least grebes. Okay, we can see these, I think, in South America. I'm not sure. I'm not certain. But anyway, they're a neat bird. They're small, of course. Caspian terns. There are plenty of them down there. See that big honking bill, orange-red? That's a Caspian tern. Brown pelicans. This was offshore. Look at this color of this water. It's just these different shades of blue going out. Beautiful, beautiful beaches. And we actually went snorkeling out on some of these beaches. Look at the color of the water there. You go along these edges here, and there's all kind of like little reefs and rocks and all kind of tropical fish and sea stars and different things like that. In fact, a lot of the seashore of Cuba is undeveloped. So you walk out to coral reefs. It'll be like you can actually head out and see a coral reef, and you'll see the fish hanging around the coral reefs, similar, the ones that you see in the aquarium or down in an aquarium. Really gorgeous to snorkel. So I'm glad that we took our snorkeling gear. Although, in this one place, which was it was Canope, it was inland. It was a big cavernous opening, that was filled with water, and but it has an opening to the sea, so that there were tropical fish in there. But I dove in, and I dove from kind of high, and I dove in, and my face mask come off, and guess where it went? Straight to the bottom. Face masks don't float. So it was, but I did save the snorkel part. So now I have a snorkel. Well, that floated, but the rest of it went straight down. Anyway, I was able to borrow another person's snorkeling so we could do it. This is another view of the beach. This is this shallow part is where you see a lot of and where it comes up to this darker part is where the tropical fish were, and a lot of good, beautiful sea life. Bahama mockingbird. Okay, it's very similar to our mockingbird. This was hard to find. This was really hard to find. It's only found in a couple places there, and took us a while to find it. Orient's warbler. Again, the warblers are hard because they kind of hang back in the lush vegetation. Gorgeous warbler with a bright white eye ring. Mangrove cuckoo. We actually have them in Florida, but they're kind of scarce. I saw one the last time I was in Florida, but I saw it for just a brief second as it flew over our heads. But that's a nice, gorgeous cuckoo. Cuban bullfinch, you see in the middle here, just a black bullfinch, a seed-eating bird. And the Cuban kite, that's one of the ones we did not see, critically endangered, last seen in 2010 on the far eastern end of Cuba. looks like a snail kite, and they actually eat the same type of apple snails and other snails that the snail kite that we occasionally have in Florida and we have in the West Indies eats. So at the end of our trip, we ended up in Havana. It's the capital city, has about 2.15 million people. It's the Rome of the Caribbean. At one time, it was a famous hotspot for Americans to go and gamble, and there's like Las Vegas is now. And people would just shoot over and go to the beaches and go to the casinos and go to the club. And Ricky Ricardo came from Cuba. You know, if you know the Lucille Ball show. And it's known, and it still has wonderful music and food. There's samba music being played all around, and it's lively, and it's really cool to just walk around in the streets down there. There's a big square. This is a famous square. There's like government buildings and other buildings here. Over here on the right, we saw this outside of our window from our hotel. You can see that not all the places that are kept up. Some of them are falling apart. They keep them up the best they can. There's actually a place called Fuslandia. A gentleman made out of tiles. He made an entire. He put these tiles all over buildings, fences, walls, everywhere. What's it called? Fuslandia. Excuse me. It's a famous artist. There's another interesting building. Playing dominoes. This is where near the end, this is a Cuban guy who owned this casa. He's teaching me and I guess, is that Linda? Oh, yeah, that's Linda. How to play dominoes. Dominoes is the national game of Cuba. Everybody plays dominoes. You'll see people playing dominoes on the streets. Now, I used to see people play checkers or whatever, or cards. They play dominoes. And if you don't know anything about dominoes, every domino is different. And so the strategy of the game is to know which ones have been played and which ones are in your hand and which ones are left. And you play accordingly to be able to win the domino game. They bet money on it and everything. And here's me relaxing with this cat that just came and jumped up on me. And I said, okay, it was cool. Here's a nice dinner that we had at the place. Again, rice, beans, and some kind of a meat. And there's some nice vegetables. This is one of our rooms at the casa that we stayed. You see here, that's our air conditioning, which hardly ever worked. But when it was on, it was nice. When it wasn't, it was hot. But anyway, overall, it was a wonderful, beautiful trip. There are nice restaurants there. That's me and my wife, Linda. And here's Kathy and Nancy. And I was thinking about whether I was going to say this or not, but I'm going to say it because they know I will. See how big these drinks are? These guys were pounding them down the whole time. It was like unbelievable. They were so much fun, though. They were so much fun. No, they didn't drink that much, but these are some nice drinks there. And there's a sunset, beautiful sunset. End of presentation, end of our trip to Cuba. Okay, anyone have any questions, comments? I guess you want to do you have any over there now, Neville, from the chat?
Yeah, let's ask online.
Later? Who do you want to go first, online or in person? Okay, sorry, Carol, I'll get to you. Okay, you have a question? You see any there? I guess I can see too, can I? Oh yeah, well, here's 12 questions. Okay. The sound keeps cutting out. I can see Joe's mouth moving, but sound not always coming through. Oh, God. Oh, you fixed that?
Yeah, Joe, that was right at the beginning.
Oh, okay, okay. And then migration is Saturday, September 16th. Okay, good. Not the 17th. Thank you. Okay. Torture vehicle. Any questions? Okay, so Cal, do you have a question? Wait a minute. White morph, right, awardaments. They call it awardaments. WURDEMANNS. Fine. I'm going to check it out later. Okay, it's either a white morph, great blue heron, or it's a wordamans. But anyway, there is a white wordamans in Florida, so maybe I just assumed the same in Cuba. Thank you. Carol? Okay, we were there for the actual trip, birding trip was 13 days, but we spent days, a couple days ahead, and a couple days after, and we saw quite a number of birders on our trip. We saw other groups. Say again? 30. Yeah, in between, kind of. We saw different birders at different places. Because it's a regular. They're trying to get, because there's a lot of people that go to Cuba that don't have the same issues Americans do. For people from all over the world go to Cuba easily, except for us, and people all over the world can deal with Cuba, except if dealing with Cuba affects their status with American businesses. Because you can ship stuff to Cuba, but there might be a penalty for doing that. Like you can't deal with us in our ports and stuff like that. So, but basically all the rest of the world, there were a number of Canadians, there were a number of East Europeans. So actually, I'm going to up that number to more like 50. I think there might 50 other birders that we saw. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Not underman. This is from Nancy. Not underman. It was white morph great blue heron. And it's not underman, it's wordamans. And there were Polish. Oh, Russians. Oh my God. Oh, there were Russians. There were lots of Russians there. We saw lots of Russians in some of the beaches and the beach places, of course, because they established connections over time. Russia doesn't support them like they did right after the revolution. Ever since Russia, ever since Glasnost and Russia, gave up its borders and stuff like that to, when Reagan and Gorbachev, they haven't been supporting Cuba as they used to. So
Bob
that's
Dixon.
another issue there. Okay, and yes, there are a number of Russian birders there too, and Russian people.
As opposed to Russian birders.
Yes, there were both. Okay, any other questions? Can I mute? Yeah, I guess so.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending today's lecture. Just a reminder, our next lecture is on October 3rd, which is also a Tuesday. The speaker for that lecture is Chris Bloom, who is currently doing research at Virginia Tech. He was at UMBC, and he's going to be talking about a mammal with wings, which is bats of Baltimore, and some of the research he has been doing with respect to bats and them being pollution monitors for Baltimore City. So I hope to see many of your faces again. It will be a hybrid lecture, and we will have a sound system for that. So, because that speaker is not going to be physically present, but unlike today, we will have a sound system then, so you will actually be able to hear him. Unlike Alex today, we totally forgot that he's not going to be here. Yeah. So that concludes this lecture. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again. Thanks.